Book 3, Part 5 of Herodotus' Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Histories, Volume 1, by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by A.D. Godley. Book 3, Part 5, paragraphs 80 through 101. After the tumult quieted down, and 5 days passed, the rebels against the Magi held a council on the whole state of affairs, at which sentiments were uttered which to some Greeks seem incredible, but there is no doubt that they were spoken. Autones was for turning the government over to the Persian people. It seems to me, he said, that there can no longer be a single sovereign over us, for that is not pleasant or good. You saw the insolence of Cambyses, how far it went, and you had your share of the insolence of the Magis. How can monarchy be a fit thing, when the ruler can do what he wants with impunity? Give this power to the best man on earth, and it would stir him to unaccustomed thoughts. Insolence is created in him by the good things to hand, while from birth envy is rooted in man. Acquiring the two, he possesses complete evil, for being satiated he does many reckless things, some from insolence, some from envy. And yet an absolute ruler ought to be free of envy, having all good things, but he becomes the opposite of this towards his citizens. He envies the best who thrive and live, and is pleased by the worst of his fellows, and he is the best confidant of slander. Of all men he is the most inconsistent, for if you admire him modestly he is angry that you do not give him excessive attention, but if he gives him excessive attention he is angry because one is a flatterer. But I have yet worse to say of him than that. He upsets the ancestral ways, and rapes women, and kills indiscriminately. But the rule of the multitude has in the first place the loveliest name of all, equality, and does in the second place none of the things that a monarch does. It determines offices by lot, and holds power accountable, and conducts all deliberating publicly. Therefore I give my opinion that we make an end of monarchy and exalt the multitude, for all things are possible for the majority. Such was the judgment of Autones, but Megabyzus urged that they resort to oligarchy. I agree, said he, with all that Autones says against the rule of one, but when he tells you to give the power to the multitude, his judgment strays from the best. Nothing is more foolish and violent than a useless mob. For men fleeing the insolence of a tyrant to fall victim to the insolence of the unguided populace is by no means to be tolerated. Whatever the one does, he does with knowledge, but for the other knowledge is impossible. How can they have knowledge who have not learned or seen for themselves what is best, but always rush headlong and drive blindly onward, like a river in flood? Let those like democracy who wish ill to Persia, but let us choose a group of the best men and invest those with the power. For we ourselves shall be among them, and among the best men it is likely that there will be the best counsels. Such was the judgment of Megabyzus. Darius was the third to express his opinion. It seems to me, he said, that Megabyzus speaks well concerning democracy, but not concerning oligarchy. For if the three are proposed, and all are at their best for the sake of argument, the best democracy and oligarchy and monarchy, I hold that monarchy is by far the most excellent. One could describe nothing better than the rule of the one best man. Using the best judgment, he will govern the multitude with perfect wisdom, and best conceal plans made for the defeat of enemies. But in an oligarchy, the desire of many to do the state good service often produces bitter hate among them, for because each one wishes to be first and to make his opinions prevail, violent hate is the outcome, from which comes faction, and from faction killing, and from killing it reverts to monarchy, and by this is shown how much better monarchy is. Then again, when the people rule, it is impossible that wickedness will not occur, and when wickedness towards the state occurs, hatred does not result among the wicked, but strong alliances, for those that want to do the state harm conspire to do it together. This goes on until one of the people rises to stop such men. He therefore becomes the people's idol, and being their idol is made their monarch, and thus he also proves that monarchy is best. But, to conclude the whole matter in one word, tell me, where did freedom come from for us, and who gave it, from the people, or an oligarchy, or a single ruler? I believe, therefore, that we who were liberated through one man should maintain such a government, and, besides this, that we should not alter our ancestral ways that are good, that would not be better. Having to choose between these three options, 4 of the 7 men preferred the last. Then Otanes, whose proposal to give the Persians equality was defeated, spoke thus among them all: "Fellow partisans, it is plain that one of us must be made king, whether by lot or entrusted with the office by the choice of the Persians or in some other way, but I shall not compete with you. I desire neither to rule nor to be ruled, but if I waive my claim to be king, I make this condition, that neither I nor any of my descendants shall be subject to any one of you." To these terms the 6 others agreed. Otanes took no part in the contest, but stood aside, and to this day his house, and no other in Persia, remains free, and is ruled only so far as it is willing to be, so long as it does not transgress Persian law. The rest of the 7 then considered what was the fairest way of making a king, and they decided that if another of the 7 than Otanes should gain the royal power, that Otanes and his descendants should receive a yearly gift of Median clothing, and everything else that the Persians hold most valuable. The reason for this decision was that it was he who had first planned the matter and assembled the conspirators. For Otanes, then, they chose this particular honor, but with regard to all of them they decreed that any one of the 7 should, if he wished, enter the king's palace unannounced, except when the king was sleeping with a woman, and that the king should be forbidden to take a wife except from the households of the conspirators. As for the making of a king, they decided that he should be elected whose horse, after they were all in their saddles in the suburb of the city, should first be heard to neigh at sunrise. Now Darius had a clever groom, whose name was Oberes. When the council broke up, Darius said to him, "Oberes, we have resolved to do as follows about the kingship. He shall be elected whose horse, after we are all mounted on our horses in the suburb of the city, neighs first at sunrise. Now, if you have any cunning, figure out how we, and no one else, can win this prize." "Master," Oberes answered, "if this is to determine whether you become king or not, be confident for this reason, and have an easy mind, for no one else shall be king before you. Such are the tricks I have." "Then," said Darius, "if you have any trick such as you say, use it and don't put it off, for tomorrow is the day of decision." When Oberes heard that, he did as follows. At nightfall he brought one of the mares which Darius's horse particularly favored, and tethered her in the suburb of the city. Then, bringing Darius's horse, he repeatedly led him near the horse, bumping against the mare, and at last let the horse mount. At dawn of the day the 6 came on horseback, as they had agreed. As they rode out through the suburb and came to the place where the mare had been tethered in the past night, Darius's horse trotted forward and whinnied, and as he did so there came lightning and thunder out of a clear sky. These signs given to Darius were thought to be foreordained, and made his election perfect. His companions leapt from their horses and bowed to him. Some say that this was Oberes' plan, but there is another story in Persia besides this, that he rubbed this mare's vulva with his hand, which he then kept inside his clothing until the 6 were about to let go their horses at sunrise, when he took his hand out and held it to the nostrils of Darius's horse, which at once snorted and whinnied. So Darius, son of Histiphus, was made king, and the whole of Asia, which Cyrus first and Cambyses after him had conquered, was subject to him, except the Arabians. These did not yield as slaves of the Persians, but were united to them by friendship, having given Cambyses passage into Egypt, which the Persians could not enter without the consent of the Arabians. Darius took wives from the noblest houses of Persia, marrying Cyrus's daughters Atossa and Artistone. Atossa had been wife of her brother Cambyses and afterward of the Magus. Aristone was a virgin. He also married a daughter of Cyrus's son Smerdis, whose name was Parmis, and the daughter of Otanes, who had discovered the truth about the Magus, and everything was full of his power. First he made and set up a carved stone, upon which was cut the figure of a horseman, with this inscription: "Darius, son of Histiphus, aided by the excellence of his horse," here followed the horse's name, "and of Oberes his groom, got possession of the kingdom of Persia." Having done these things in Persia, he divided his dominions into 20 provinces, which they call stratopes, and having divided his dominions and appointed governors, he instructed each people to pay him tribute, consolidating neighboring peoples, and distributing outlying peoples among different provinces, passing over those adjoining. I will now show how he divided his provinces and the tributes which were paid him yearly. Those that paid in silver were required to render the weight of a Babylonian talent, those that paid in gold of a Euboic talent, the Babylonian talent being equal to 78 Euboic minae. In the reigns of Cyrus and Cambyses after him there was no fixed tribute, but payment was made in gifts. It is because of this fixing of tribute, and other similar ordinances, that the Persians called Darius the merchant, Cambyses the master, and Cyrus the father, for Darius made petty profit out of everything, Cambyses was harsh and arrogant, Cyrus was merciful and always worked for their well-being. The Ionians, Magnesians of Asia, Aeolians, Carians, Lycians, Milians, and Pamphylians, on whom Darius laid one joint tribute, paid a revenue of 400 talents of silver. This was established as his first province. The Mysians, Lydians, Laconians, Cabalians, and Hittenians paid 500 talents. This was the second province. The third comprised the Hellespontians on the right of the entrance of the straits, the Phrygians, Thracians of Asia, Paphlagonians, Myrmidonians, and Syrians. These paid 360 talents of tribute. The fourth province was Cilicia. This rendered 360 white horses, one for each day in the year, and 500 talents of silver. 140 of these were expended on the horsemen who were the guard of Cilicia. The 360 that remained were paid to Darius. The fifth province was the country, except the part belonging to the Arabians, which paid no tribute, between Pisidian, a city founded on the Cilician and Syrian border by Amphilochus, son of Amphiaraus, and Egypt. This paid 350 talents. In this province was all Phoenicia and the part of Syria called Palestine, and Cyprus. The sixth province was Egypt and the neighboring parts of Libya, and Cyrene and Barca, all of which were included in the province of Egypt. From here came 700 talents, besides the income in silver from the fish of the lake Moeris. Besides that silver and the assessment of grain that was given also, 700 talents were paid, for 120,000 bushels of grain were assigned to the Persians quartered at the White Wall of Memphis and their allies. The Satagidae, Gandari, Dadicae, and Aparete paid together 170 talents. This was the seventh province. The eighth was Susa and the rest of the Scythian country, paying 300 talents. From Babylon and the rest of Assyria came to Darius 1,000 talents of silver and 500 castrated boys. This was the ninth province. Ecbatana and the rest of Media, with the Paracanians and Orthocorybantians, paid 450 talents, and was the 10th province. The 11th comprised the Caspii, Passacae, Pantimathi, and Derete, paying jointly 200. The 12th, the Bactrians as far as the land of the Egli, these paid 360. The 13th, the Pactaic country and Armenia and the lands adjoining as far as the Euxine Sea, these paid 400. The 14th province was made up of the Sagarti, Seranges, Thamanea, Utki, Missi, and the inhabitants of those islands of the southern sea, on which the king settles the so-called displaced people. These together paid a tribute of 600 talents. The Sakai and Caspii were the 15th, paying 250. The Parthians, Chorasmians, Sogdi, and Eri were the 16th, paying 300. The Paricanii and the Ethiopians of Asia, the 17th, paid 400. The Matieni, Saspiri, and Alarodii were the 18th, and 200 talents were the appointed tribute. The Mashi, Tiberini, Macrones, Masinioki, and Maris, the 19th province, were ordered to pay 300. The Indians made up the 20th province. These are more in number than any nation of which we know, and they paid a greater tribute than any other province, namely 360 talents of gold dust. Now, if these Babylonian silver talents be calculated in Euboic money, the sum is seen to be 9,880 Euboic talents, and the gold coin, being 13 times the value of the silver, the gold dust is found to be worth 4,680 Euboic talents. Therefore it is seen by adding together all that Darius collected a yearly tribute of 14,560 talents. I take no account of figures less than 10. This was Darius's revenue from Asia and a few parts of Libya. But as time went on he drew tribute also from the islands and the dwellers in Europe as far as Thessaly. The tribute is stored by the king in this fashion. He melts it down, and pours it into earthen vessels. When the vessel is full he breaks the earthenware away, and when he needs money coins as much as serves his purpose. These were the governments and appointments of tribute. The Persian country is the only one which I have not recorded as tributary, for the Persians live free from all taxes. As for those on whom no tribute was laid, but who rendered gifts instead, they were firstly the Ethiopians nearest to Egypt, whom Cambyses conquered in his march towards the long-lived Ethiopians, and also those who dwell about the holy city Nissa, where Dionysus is the god of their festivals. These Ethiopians and their neighbours use the same seed as the Indian Kalantai, and they live underground. These together brought every year, and still bring, a gift of 2 shonixes of unrefined gold, 200 blocks of ebony, 5 Ethiopian boys, and 20 great elephants' tusks. Gifts were also required of the Colchians and their neighbours as far as the Caucasus Mountains, which is as far as the Persian rule reaches, the country north of the Caucasus paying no regard to the Persians. These were rendered every 4 years, and are still rendered, namely, 100 boys and as many maids. The Arabians rendered 1,000 talents weight of frankincense yearly. Such were the gifts of these peoples to the king, besides the tribute. All this abundance of gold, from which the Indians send the aforementioned gold dust to the king, they obtain in the following way. To the east of the Indian country is sand. Of all the people of Asia whom we know, even those about whom something is said with precision, the Indians dwell nearest to the dawn and the rising sun, for on the eastern side of India all is desolate because of the sand. There are many Indian nations, none speaking the same language. Some of them are nomads, some not. Some dwell in the river marshes and live on raw fish, which they catch from reed boats. Each boat is made from one joint of reed. These Indians wear clothes of bulrushes. They mow and cut these from the river, then weave them crosswise like a mat, and wear them like a breastplate. Other Indians, to the east of these, are nomads and eat raw flesh. They are called Patiae. It is said to be their custom that when any one of their fellows, whether man or woman, is sick, a man's closest friends kill him, saying that if wanted by disease he will be lost to them as meat; though he denies that he is sick, they will not believe him, but kill and eat him. When a woman is sick, she is put to death like the men by the women who are her closest acquaintances. As for one that has come to old age, they sacrifice him and feast on his flesh, but not many reach this reckoning, for before that every one who falls ill they kill. There are other Indians again who kill no living creature, nor plant anything, nor are accustomed to have houses. They eat grass, and they have a grain growing naturally from the earth in its husk, about the size of a millet seed, which they gather with the husk and boil and eat. When any one of them falls sick, he goes into the desert and lies there, and no one notices whether he is sick or dies. These Indians whom I have described have intercourse openly like cattle. They are all black-skinned like Ethiopians. Their semen too, which they ejaculate into the women, is not white like other men's, but black like their skin, and resembles in this respect that of the Ethiopians. These Indians dwell far away from the Persians southwards, and were not subjects of King Darius. End of Book 3, Part 5.
Book 3, Part 6 of Herodotus's Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anne Cheng. Histories, Volume 1, by Herodotus of Halicarnassus. Translated by A. D. Godley, Book 3, Part 6, paragraphs 102 to 125. Other Indians dwell near the town of Caspotyrus and the Pactaic country, north of the rest of India. These live like the Bactrians. They are of all Indians the most warlike, and it is they who are sent for the gold, for in these parts all is desolate because of the sand. In this sandy desert are ants, not as big as dogs, but bigger than foxes. The Persian king has some of these, which have been caught there. These ants live underground, digging out the sand in the same way as the ants in Greece, to which they are very similar in shape, and the sand which they carry from the holes is full of gold. It is for this sand that the Indians set forth into the desert. They harness 3 camels apiece, males on either side sharing the drawing, and a female in the middle. The man himself rides on the female, that when harnessed has been taken away from as young an offspring as may be. Their camels are swift as horses, and much better able to bear burdens besides. I do not describe the camel's appearance to Greeks, for they know it, but I shall tell them something that they do not know concerning it. The hind legs of the camel have 4 thigh bones and 4 knee joints. Its genitals are turned towards the tail between the hind legs. Thus, and with teams so harnessed, the Indians ride after the gold, being careful to be engaged in taking it when the heat is greatest, for the ants are then out of sight underground. Now in these parts the sun is hottest in the morning, not at midday as elsewhere, but from sunrise to the hour of market closing. Through these hours it is much hotter than in Hellas at noon, so that men are said to sprinkle themselves with water at this time. At midday the sun's heat is nearly the same in India as elsewhere. As it goes to afternoon, the sun of India has the power of the morning sun in other lands. As day declines, it becomes ever cooler, until at sunset it is exceedingly cold. So when the Indians come to the place with their sacks, they fill these with the sand and drive back as fast as possible, for the ants at once scent them out, the Persians say, and give chase. They say nothing is equal to them for speed, so that unless the Indians have a head start while the ants were gathering, not one of them would get away. They cut loose the male trace camels, which are slower than the females, as they begin to lag, one at a time. The mares never tire, for they remember the young that they have left. Such is the tale. Most of the gold, say the Persians, is got in this way by the Indians. They dig some from mines in their country too, but it is less abundant. The most outlying nations of the world have somehow drawn the finest things as their lot, exactly as Greece has drawn the possession of far the best seasons. As I have lately said, India lies at the world's most distant eastern limit, and in India all living creatures, 4-footed and flying, are much bigger than those of other lands, except the horses, which are smaller than the Median horses called Nisaean. Moreover, the gold there, whether dug from the earth or brought down by rivers, or got as I have described, is very abundant. There, too, wool more beautiful and excellent than the wool of sheep grows on wild trees. These trees supply the Indians with clothing. Again, Arabia is the most distant to the south of all inhabited countries, and this is the only country which produces frankincense and myrrh, and cassia and cinnamon, and gum mastic. All these except myrrh are difficult for the Arabians to get. They gather frankincense by burning that storax which Phoenicians carried to Hellas. They burn this, and so get the frankincense. For the spice-bearing trees are guarded by small winged snakes of varied colour, many around each tree. These are the snakes that attack Egypt. Nothing except the smoke of storax will drive them away from the trees. The Arabians also say that the whole country would be full of these snakes if the same thing did not occur among them that I believe occurs among vipers. Somehow the forethought of God, just as is reasonable, being wise, has made all creatures prolific that are timid and edible, so that they do not become extinct through being eaten, whereas few young are born to hardy and vexatious creatures. On the one hand, because the hare is hunted by every beast and bird and man, therefore it is quite prolific. Alone of all creatures it conceives during pregnancy. Some of the unborn young are hairy, some still naked, some are still forming in the womb, while others are just conceived. On the one hand there is this sort of thing, but on the other hand the lioness, that is so powerful and so bold, once in her life bears one cub, for in the act of bearing she casts her uterus out with her cub. The explanation of this is that when the cub first begins to stir in the mother, its claws, much sharper than those of any other creature, tear the uterus, and the more it grows the more it scratches and tears, so that when the hour of birth is near, Seldom is any of the uterus left intact. So too, if the vipers and the winged serpents of Arabia were born in the natural manner of serpents, life would be impossible for men. But as it is when they copulate, while the male is in the act of procreation, and as soon as he has ejaculated his seed, the female seizes him by the neck and does not let go until she has bitten through. The male dies in the way described, but the female suffers in return for the male the following punishment. Avenging their father, the young, while they are still within the womb, gnaw at their mother, and eating through her bowels thus make their way out. Other snakes that do no harm to men lay eggs and hatch out a vast number of young. The Arabian winged serpents do indeed seem to be numerous, but that is because, although there are vipers in every land, these are all in Arabia and are found nowhere else. The Arabians get frankincense in the foregoing way, and cassia in the following way. When they go after it, they bind ox hides and other skins all over their bodies and faces, except for the eyes. Cassia grows in a shallow lake. Around this and in it lived winged creatures, very like bats, that squeak similarly and make a fierce resistance. These have to be kept away from the eyes in order to take the cassia. As for cinnamon, they gather it in an even stranger way. Where it comes from and what land produces it they cannot say, except that it is reported reasonably enough to grow in the places where Dionysus was reared. There are great birds, it is said, that take these dry sticks which we have learned from the Phoenicians to call cinnamon, and carry them off to nests stuck with mud to precipitous cliffs, where man has no means of approach. The Arabian solution to this is to cut dead oxen and asses and other beasts of burden into the largest possible pieces, then to set these near the eyries and withdraw far off. The birds then fly down, it is said, and carry the pieces of the beasts up to their nests, while these, not being able to bear the weight, break and fall down the mountain side, and then the Arabians come and gather them up. Thus is cinnamon said to be gathered, and so to come from Arabia to other lands. But ledanon, which the Arabians call ladanon, is produced yet more strangely than this, for it is the most fragrant thing produced and the most malodorous, for it is found in he-goats' beards, forming in them like gum among timber. This is used in the manufacture of many perfumes. There is nothing that the Arabians burn so often as incense. Enough of marvels, and yet the land of Arabia gives off a scent as sweet as if divine. They have besides 2 marvellous kinds of sheep, found nowhere else. One of these has tails no less than 9 feet long. Were the sheep to trail these after them, they would suffer by the chafing of the tails on the ground. But every shepherd there knows enough of carpentry to make little carts which they fix under the tails, binding the tail of each sheep on its own cart. The other kind of sheep has a tail a full 3 feet broad. Where south inclines westwards, the part of the world stretching farthest towards the sunset is Ethiopia. This produces gold in abundance, and huge elephants, and all sorts of wild trees, and ebony, and the tallest and handsomest and longest lived people. These then are the most distant lands in Asia and Libya. But concerning those in Europe that are the farthest away towards evening, I cannot speak with assurance, for I do not believe that there is a river called by foreigners Eridanus issuing into the northern sea, where our amber is said to come from, nor do I have any knowledge of tin islands, where our tin is brought from. The very name Eridanus betrays itself as not a foreign but a Greek name, invented by some poet. Nor for all my diligence have I been able to learn from one who has seen it that there is a sea beyond Europe. All we know is that our tin and amber come from the most distant parts. But in the north of Europe there is by far the most gold. In this matter again I cannot say with assurance how the gold is produced, but it is said that one-eyed men called Arimaspians steal it from griffins. But I do not believe this, that there are one-eyed men who have a nature otherwise the same as other men. The most outlying lands, though, as they enclose and wholly surround all the rest of the world, are likely to have those things which we think the finest and the rarest. There is a plain in Asia shut in on all sides by mountains, through which there are 5 passes. This plain was once the Chorasmians, being at the boundaries of the Chorasmians, the Hyrcanians, Parthians, Serangians, and Thamanae, but since the Persians have held power, it has been the king's. Now from the encircling mountains flows a great river whose name is the Aesis. Its stream divides into 5 channels, and formerly watered the lands of the above-mentioned peoples, going to each through a different pass, but since the beginning of the Persian rule the king has blocked the mountain passes, and closed each passage with a gate. With the water barred from outlet, the plain within the mountains becomes a lake, seeing that the river pours into it and finds no way out. Those, therefore, who before were accustomed to use the water, endure great hardship in not being able to use it, for, during the winter, God rains for them just as for the rest of mankind, but in the summer they are in need of the water for their sown millet and sesame. So, whenever no water is given to them, they come into Persia with their women, and cry and howl before the door of the king's palace, until the king commands that the river gate should be opened for those whose need is greatest. Then, when this land has drunk its fill of water, that gate is shut, and the king has another opened for those of the rest who most require it. I know by hearsay that he gets a lot of money, over and above the tribute, for opening the gates. So much for these matters. Of the 7 men who revolted against the Magus, one, Intaphanes, got his death through his own violence immediately after the rebellion. He wanted to enter the palace and speak with the king, and in fact the law was that the rebels against the Magus could come into the king's presence unannounced, if the king were not having intercourse with one of his wives. Intaphanes, as one of the 7, claimed his right to enter unannounced, but the gatekeeper and the messenger forbade him, telling him that the king was having intercourse with one of his wives. Intaphanes thought that they were lying. Drawing his scimitar, he cut off their noses and ears, then strung these on his horse's bridle, and hung it around the men's necks, and so let them go. They showed themselves to the king, and told him why they had been treated so. Darius, fearing that the 6 had done this by common consent, sent for each and asked his opinion, whether they approved what had been done, and being assured that they had no part in it, he seized Intaphanes with his sons and all his household, for he strongly suspected that the man was plotting a rebellion with his kinsmen, and imprisoned them with the intention of putting them to death. Then Intaphanes' wife began coming to the palace gates, weeping and lamenting, and by continuing to do this same thing she persuaded Darius to pity her, and he sent a messenger to tell her, "Woman, King Darius will allow one of your imprisoned relatives to survive, whomever you prefer of them all." After considering, she answered, "If indeed the king gives me the life of one, I choose from them all my brother." Darius was astonished when he heard her answer, and sent someone who asked her, "Woman, the king asks you with what in mind you abandon your husband and your children, and choose to save the life of your brother, who is less close to you than your children, and less dear than your husband." "O king," she answered, "I may have another husband if a god is willing, and other children if I lose these, but since my father and mother are no longer living, there is no way that I can have another brother. I said what I did with that in mind." Darius thought that the woman answered well, and for her sake he released the one for whom she had asked, and the eldest of her sons as well. He put to death all the rest. Thus immediately perished one of the 7. While Cambyses was still ill, the following events occurred. The governor of Sardis, appointed by Cyrus, was Orotes, a Persian. This man had an impious desire, for although he had not been injured or spoken badly of by Polycrates of Samos, and had in fact never even seen him before, he desired to seize and kill him, for the following reason, most people say. As Orotes and another Persian whose name was Mithridates, governor of the province at Dassaleium, sat at the king's doors, they fell from talking to quarrelling, and as they compared their achievements, Mithridates said to Orotes, "You are not to be reckoned a man. The island of Samos lies close to your province, yet you have not added it to the king's dominion, an island so easy to conquer that some native of it revolted against his rulers with 15 hoplites, and is now lord of it. Some say that Herodotus, angered by this reproach, did not so much desire to punish the source of it as to destroy Polycrates utterly, the occasion of the reproach. A few people, however, say that when Herodotus sent a herald to Samos with some request, it is not said what this was, the herald found Polycrates lying in the men's apartments in the company of Anacreon of Chios, and, whether on purpose to show contempt for Herodotus, or by mere chance, when Herodotus' herald entered and addressed him, Polycrates, then lying with his face to the wall, never turned or answered him. These are the 2 reasons alleged for Polycrates' death. Believe whichever you like. But the consequence was that Herodotus, then at Magnesia, which is above the river Myander, sent Mursus, son of Gyges, a Lydian, with a message to Samos, having learned Polycrates' intention. For Polycrates was the first of the Greeks whom we know to aim at the mastery of the sea, leaving out of account Minos of Knossos, and any others who before him may have ruled the sea, of what may be called the human race. Polycrates was the first, and he had great hope of ruling Ionia and the islands. Learning then that he had this intention, Herodotus sent him this message. Herodotus addresses Polycrates as follows: I find that you aim at great things, but that you have not sufficient money for your purpose. Do then as I direct, and you will succeed yourself and will save me. King Cambyses aims at my death, of this I have clear intelligence. Now, if you will transport me and my money, you may take some yourself and let me keep the rest. Thus you shall have wealth enough to rule all Hellas. If you mistrust what I tell you about the money, send someone who is most trusted by you, and I will prove it to him. Hearing this, Polycrates was pleased and willing, and since he had a great desire for money, he first sent one of his townsmen, Myandrius, son of Myandrius, to have a look. This man was his scribe. It was he who not long afterwards dedicated in the Heraeum all the splendid furnishings of the men's apartment in Polycrates' house. When Herodotus heard that an inspection was imminent, he filled 8 chests with stones, leaving only a very shallow space at the top. Then he laid gold on top of the stones, locked the chests, and kept them ready. Myandrius came and saw, and brought word back to his master. Polycrates then prepared to visit Herodotus, despite the strong dissuasion of his diviners and friends, and a vision seen by his daughter in a dream. She dreamt that she saw her father in the air overhead being washed by Zeus and anointed by Helios. After this vision she used all means to persuade him not to go on this journey to Herodotus. Even as he went to his 50-oared ship, she prophesied evil for him. When Polycrates threatened her that if he came back safe she would long remain unmarried, she answered with a prayer that his threat might be fulfilled, for she would rather, she said, long remain unmarried than lose her father. But Polycrates would listen to no advice. He sailed to meet Herodotus with a great retinue of followers, among whom was Democedes, son of Caliphon, a man of Croton and the most skilful physician of his time. But no sooner had Polycrates come to Magnesia than he was horribly murdered in a way unworthy of him and of his aims. For except for the sovereigns of Syracuse, no sovereign of Greek race is fit to be compared with Polycrates for magnificence. Having killed him in some way not fit to be told, Herodotus then crucified him. As for those who had accompanied him, he let the Samians go, telling them to thank him that they were free. Those who were not Samians or servants of Polycrates' followers he kept for slaves. And Polycrates, hanging in the air, fulfilled his daughter's vision in every detail. For he was washed by Zeus when it rained, and he was anointed by Helios as he exuded sweat from his body. End of Book 3, Part 6.
Book 3, Part 7 of Herodotus' Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Histories, Volume 1, by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by A.D. Godley. Book 3, Part 7, paragraphs 126 through 143. This was the end of Polycrates' string of successes, as Amasis, king of Egypt, had forewarned him. But not long after, atonement for Polycrates overtook Orates. After the death of Cambyses and the rule of the Magi, Orates stayed in Sardis, where he did not help the Persians in any way to regain the power taken from them by the Medes, but, to the contrary, in this confusion killed two prominent Persians, Mithridates, the governor from Dasilium, who had taunted him about Polycrates, and Mithridates' son, Cranaspes, and on top of many other violent acts, he set an ambush down the road after a messenger from Darius came with a message which displeased him, and killed that messenger on his homeward journey, and concealed the man's body and horse. So, when Darius became king, he wanted to punish Orates for all his wrongdoing, and especially for killing Mithridates and his son. But he thought it best not to send an army openly against the satrap, seeing that everything was still in confusion, and he was still new to the royal power. Moreover, he heard that Orates was very powerful, having a guard of 1,000 Persian spearmen, and being governor of the Phrygian and Lydian and Ionian province. He had recourse then to the following expedient. Having summoned an assembly of the most prominent Persians, he addressed them as follows: Persians, which of you will promise to do this for me, not with force and numbers, but by cunning? Where there is need for cunning, force has no business. So then, which of you would either bring me Orates alive, or kill him? For he has done the Persians no good, but much harm. He has destroyed two of us, Mithridates and his son, and is killing my messengers that are sent to recall him, displaying an insolence that is not to be borne. So then, before he does the Persians some greater harm, he has to be punished by us with death. Darius asked this, and 30 men promised, each wanting to do it himself. Darius told them not to argue, but draw lots. They did, and the lot fell to Bagaeus, son of Artantes. Bagaeus, having drawn the lot, did as follows. He had many letters written concerning many things, and put the seal of Darius on them, and then went with them to Sardis. When he got there and came into Orates' presence, he took out each letter in turn and gave it to one of the royal scribes to read. All of the governors of the king have scribes. Bagaeus gave the letters to test the spearmen, whether they would consent to revolt against Orates. Seeing that they were greatly affected by the rolls, and yet more by what was written in them, he gave another, in which were these words: Persians, King Darius forbids you to be Orates' guard. Hearing this, they lowered their spears for him. When Bagaeus saw that they obeyed the letter so far, he was encouraged, and gave the last roll to the scribe, in which was written, King Darius instructs the Persians in Sardis to kill Orates. Hearing this, the spearmen drew their scimitars and killed him at once. Thus atonement for Polycrates the Samian overtook Orates the Persian. Orates' slaves and other possessions were brought to Susa. Not long after this, it happened that Darius twisted his foot in dismounting from his horse while hunting, so violently that the ball of the ankle joint was dislocated from its socket. Darius called in the best physicians of Egypt, whom he had until now kept near his person. But by violently twisting the foot they made the injury worse, and for 7 days and nights the king could not sleep because of the pain. On the 8th day, when he was doing poorly, someone who had heard in Sardis of the skill of Democedes of Croton told Darius of him, and he told them to bring him as quickly as possible. When they found him among the slaves of Orates, where he was forgotten, they brought him along, dragging his chains and dressed in rags. Darius asked him, when he was brought in, if he were trained in medicine. He refused to admit it, for he was afraid that if he revealed himself he would be cut off from Hellas for good. It was clear to Darius, however, that he was trained in deceit, and he ordered those who had brought him to bring along scourges and goads. Then he confessed, saying that his training was not exact, but that he had associated with the physician and had a passing acquaintance with medicine. But when Darius turned the case over to him, and Democedes applied Greek remedies and used gentleness instead of the Egyptian's violence, he enabled him to sleep, and in a short time had him well, although Darius had no hope of regaining the use of his foot. After this, Darius rewarded him with the gift of 2 pairs of golden fetters. Is it your purpose, Democedes asked, to double my pains for making you well? Pleased by the retort, Darius sent him to his own wives. The eunuchs who conducted him told the women that this was the man who had given the king his life back. Each of them took a bowl and dipped it in a chest full of gold, so richly rewarding Democedes that the servant accompanying him, whose name was Siton, collected a very great sum of gold by picking up the staters that fell from the bowls. Now this is how Democedes had come from Croton to live with Polycrates. He was oppressed by a harsh-tempered father at Croton. Since he could not stand him, he left him and went to Aegina. Within the first year after settling there, he excelled the rest of the physicians, although he had no equipment nor any medical implements. In his second year the Aegitinans paid him a talent to be their public physician. In the third year the Athenians hired him for 100 minae, and Polycrates in the fourth year for 2 talents. Thus he came to Samos, and not least because of this man the physicians of Croton were well respected, for at this time the best physicians in Greek countries were those of Croton, and next to them those of Cyrene. About the same time the Argives had the name of being the best musicians. So now, because he had healed Darius at Susa, Democedes had a very grand house and ate at the king's table. He had everything except permission to return to the Greeks. When the Egyptian physicians, who until now had attended the king, were about to be impaled for being less skilful than a Greek, Democedes interceded with the king for them, and saved them, and he saved an Aeolian seer too, who had been a retainer of Polycrates, and was forgotten among the slaves. Democedes was a man of considerable influence with the king. A short time after this, something else occurred. There was a swelling on the breast of Atossa, the daughter of Cyrus and the wife of Darius, which broke and spread further. As long as it was small, she hid it out of shame and told no one, but when it got bad, she sent for Democedes and showed it to him. He said he would cure her, but made her swear that she would repay him by granting whatever he asked of her, and said that he would ask nothing shameful. And after he treated her and did cure her, Atossa addressed Darius in their chamber, as she had been instructed by Democedes. O king, although you have so much power, you are idle, acquiring no additional people or power for the Persians. The right thing for a man who is both young and the master of great wealth is to be seen aggrandizing himself, so that the Persians know too that they are ruled by a man. On 2 counts it is in your interest to do this, both so that the Persians know their leader is a man, and so that they be occupied by war and not have time to plot against you. You should show some industry now, while you are still young, for sense grows with the growing body, but grows too old with the aging body and loses its edge for all purposes. She said this as instructed, but he replied with this: Woman, what you have said is exactly what I had in mind to do. For I have planned to make a bridge from this continent to the other continent, and lead an army against the Scythians, and this will be done in a short time. Look, Atossa said, let the Scythians go for the present. You shall have them whenever you like. I tell you, march against Hellas. I have heard of Laconian and Argive and Attic and Corinthian women, and would like to have them as servants. You have a man who is fitter than any other to instruct and guide you in everything concerning Hellas. I mean the physician who healed your foot. Darius answered, Woman, since you think that we should make an attempt on Greece first, it seems to me best that we send Persian spies with the man whom you mention, who shall tell us everything that they learn and observe, and then when I am fully informed I shall rouse myself against them. He said this, and no sooner said than did it. For the next day at dawn he summoned 15 prominent Persians, and instructed them to go with Democedes and sail along the coast of Hellas, telling them too, by all means, to bring the physician back, and not let him escape. Having given these instructions to them, he then sent for Democedes, and asked of him that when he had shown and made clear all of Greece to the Persians, he would come back, and he told him to take all his movable goods to give his father and siblings, saying that he would give him many times as much in return, and would send with him a ship with cargo of all good things. Darius, I think, made this promise without a treacherous intent, but Democedes was afraid that Darius was testing him. Therefore he was in no hurry to accept all that was offered, but answered that he would leave his own possessions where they were, so as to have them when he returned. The ship which Darius promised him to carry the gifts for his siblings, he said he would accept. Having given the same instructions to Democedes too, Darius sent them all to the coast. They came down to the city of Sidon in Phoenicia, and there chartered 2 triremes, as well as a great galley laden with all good things, and when everything was ready they set sail for Hellas, where they surveyed and mapped the coast to which they came, until having viewed the greater and most famous parts they reached Tarentum in Italy. There Astrophilides, king of the Tarentines, out of sympathy for Democedes, took the steering gear off the Median ships and put the Persians under a guard, calling them spies. While they were in this plight, Democedes made his way to Croton, and Astrophilides did not set the Persians free and give them back what he had taken from their ships until the physician was in his own country. The Persians sailed from Tarentum and pursued Democedes to Croton, where they found him in the marketplace and tried to seize him. Some Crotoniates, who feared the Persian power, would have given him up, but others resisted and beat the Persians with their sticks. "Men of Croton, watch what you do," said the Persians. "You are harbouring an escaped slave of the king's. How do you think King Darius will like this insolence? What good will it do you if he gets away from us? What city will we attack first here? Which will we try to enslave first?" But the men of Croton paid no attention to them, so the Persians lost Democedes and the galley with which they had come, and sailed back for Asia, making no attempt to visit and learn of the further parts of Hellas, now that their guide was taken from them. But Democedes gave them a message as they were setting sail. They should tell Darius, he said, that Democedes was engaged to the daughter of Milon. For Darius held the name of Milon, the wrestler, in great honour, and to my thinking Democedes sought this match and paid a great sum for it, to show Darius that he was a man of influence in his own country, as well as in Persia. The Persians then put out from Croton, but their ships were wrecked on the coast of Iapygia, and they were made slaves in the country until Gillas, an exile from Tarentum, released and restored them to Darius, who was ready to give him whatever he wanted in return. Gillas chose to be restored to Tarentum, and told the story of his misfortune, but so as not to be the occasion of agitating Greece, if on his account a great expedition sailed against Italy, he said that it was enough that the Cnidians alone be his escort, for he supposed that the Tarentines would be the readier to receive him back, as the Cnidians were their friends. Darius kept his word, and sent a messenger to the men of Cnidos, telling them to take Gillas back to Tarentum. They obeyed Darius, but they could not persuade the Tarentines, and were not able to apply force. This is what happened, and these Persians were the first who came from Asia into Hellas, and they came to view the country for this reason. After this, King Darius conquered Samos, the greatest of all city-states, Greek or barbarian, the reason for his conquest being this. When Cambyses, son of Cyrus, invaded Egypt, many Greeks came with the army, some to trade, as was natural, and some to see the country itself. Among them was Siloson, son of Aeacus, who was Polycrates' brother, and in exile from Samos. This Siloson had a stroke of good luck. He was in the market at Memphis wearing a red cloak, when Darius, at that time one of Cambyses' guard, and as yet a man of no great importance, saw him, and coveting the cloak came and tried to buy it. When Siloson saw Darius's eagerness, by good luck he said, "I will not sell this for any money, but I give it to you free, if you must have it so much." Extolling this, Darius accepted the garment. Siloson supposed that he had lost his cloak out of foolish good nature, but in time Cambyses died, the 7 rebelled against the Magus, and Darius of the 7 came to the throne. Siloson then learned that the successor to the royal power was the man to whom he had given the garment in Egypt, so he went up to Susa and sat in the king's antechamber, saying that he was one of Darius's benefactors. When the doorkeeper brought word of this to the king, Darius asked, "But to what Greek benefactor can I owe thanks? In the little time since I have been king hardly one of that nation has come to us, and I have, I may say, no use for any Greek. Nevertheless bring him in, so that I may know what he means." The doorkeeper brought Siloson in, and the interpreters asked him, as he stood there, who he was and what he had done to call himself the king's benefactor. Then Siloson told the story of the cloak, and said that it was he who had given it. "Most generous man," said Darius, "it was you who gave me a present when I had as yet no power. I was none the less grateful then than I am now when I get a big one. In return I give you gold and silver in abundance, so you may never be sorry that you did Darius, son of Hystapes, good." Siloson answered, "Do not give me gold, O king, or silver, but Samos, my country, which our slave has now that my brother Polycrates has been killed by Orates. Give me this without killing or enslaving." Having heard this, Darius sent an army, and Otanes, one of the 7, to command it, instructing him to do whatever Siloson asked. So Otanes went down to the coast and got his army ready. Now Samos was ruled by Maandrius, son of Maandrius, who had authority delegated by Polycrates. He wanted to be the justice of men, but that was impossible. For when he learned of Polycrates' death, first he set up an altar to Zeus the Liberator, and marked out around it that sacred enclosure which is still to be seen in the suburb of the city. When this had been done, he called an assembly of all the citizens, and addressed them thus: To me, as you know, have come Polycrates' scepter and all of his power, and it is in my power now to rule you. But I, so far as it lies in me, shall not do myself what I blame in my neighbour. I always disliked it that Polycrates or any other man should lord it over men like himself. Polycrates has fulfilled his destiny, and inviting you to share his power I proclaim equality. Only I claim for my own privilege that 6 talents of Polycrates' wealth be set apart for my use, and that I and my descendants keep the priesthood of Zeus the Liberator, whose temple I have founded, and now I give you freedom. Such was Maandrius' promise to the Samians. But one of them arose and answered, But you are not even fit to rule us, low-born and vermin, but you had better give an account of the moneys you have handled. This was the speech of Telesarchus, a man of consequence among the citizens. But Maandrius, realizing that if he let go of the sovereignty someone else would make himself sovereign instead, resolved not to let it go. Withdrawing into the Acropolis, he sent for the citizens individually, as if he would give an account of the money, then he seized and bound them. So they were imprisoned, and afterwards Maandrius fell sick. His brother Lycurgus thought him likely to die, and, so that he might the more easily make himself master of Samos, he put all the prisoners to death. They had, it would seem, no desire to be free. End of Book 3, Part 7. Book 3, Part 8 of Herodotus' Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Histories, Volume 1, by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by A. D. Godley. Book 3, Part 8, paragraphs 144 through 160. So when the Persians brought Silason back to Samos, no one raised a hand against them, but Maandrius and those of his faction offered to evacuate the island under a flag of truce. Otanes agreed to this, and after the treaty was made, the Persians of highest rank sat down on seats facing the Acropolis. Now Maandrius the sovereign had a crazy brother named Charillus, who lay bound in the dungeon for some offense. This man heard what was going on, and by peering through the dungeon window saw the Persians sitting there peaceably, whereupon he cried with a loud voice that he wanted to talk to Maandrius. His brother, hearing him, had Charillus loosed and brought before him. No sooner had he been brought than he attempted with reviling and abuse to persuade Maandrius to attack the Persians. Although I am your brother, you coward, he said, and did no wrong deserving of prison, you have bound and imprisoned me. But when you see the Persians throwing you out of house and home, you have no courage to avenge yourself, though you could so easily beat them? If you are yourself afraid of them, give me your foreign guards, and I will punish them for coming here. As for you, I will give you safe conduct out of the island. This was what Charillus said, and Maandrius took his advice, to my thinking not because he was so foolish as to suppose that he would be strong enough to defeat the king, but because he did not want Silason to recover Samos safe and sound with no trouble. He wanted, therefore, by provoking the Persians to weaken Samos as much as he could before surrendering it, for he was well aware that if the Persians were hurt they would be furiously angry with the Samians. Besides, he knew that he could get himself safely off the island whenever he liked, having built a secret passage leading from the Acropolis to the sea. Maandrius then set sail from Samos, but Charillus armed all the guards, opened the Acropolis's gates, and attacked the Persians. These supposed that a full agreement had been made, and were taken unawares. The guard fell upon them and killed the Persians of highest rank, those who were carried in litters. They were engaged in this when the rest of the Persian force came up in reinforcement, and hard pressed, the guards retreated into the Acropolis. The Persian captain Otanes, seeing how big a loss the Persians had suffered, deliberately forgot the command given him at his departure by Darius not to kill or enslave any Samian, but to deliver the island intact to Silason, and he commanded his army to kill every one they took, men and boys alike. Then, while some of the Persians laid siege to the Acropolis, the rest killed every one they met, inside the temples and outside the temples alike. Maandrius sailed to Lacedaemon, escaping from Samos, and after he arrived there and brought up the possessions with which he had left his country, it became his habit to make a display of silver and gold drinking cups. While his servants were cleaning these, he would converse with the king of Sparta, Cleomenes, son of Anaxandrides, and would bring him to his house. As Cleomenes marvelled greatly at the cups whenever he saw them, Maandrius would tell him to take as many as he liked. Maandrius made this offer 2 or 3 times. Cleomenes showed his great integrity in that he would not accept, but realizing that there were others in Lacedaemon from whom Maandrius would get help by offering them the cups, he went to the Ephors and told them that it would be best for Sparta if this Samian stranger quit the country, lest he persuade Cleomenes himself or some other Spartan to do evil. The Ephors listened to his advice and banished Maandrius by proclamation. As for Samos, the Persians swept it clear and turned it over uninhabited to Silason. But afterwards Otanes, the Persian general, helped to settle the land, prompted by a dream and a disease that he contracted in his genitals. While the fleet was away at Samos, the Babylonians revolted. They had made very good preparation, for during the reign of the Magus and the rebellion of the Seven, they had taken advantage of the time and the confusion to provision themselves against the siege, and, I cannot tell how, this went undetected. At last they revolted openly and did this. Sending away all the mothers, each chose one woman, whomever he liked of his domestics, as bread-maker. As for the rest, they gathered them together and strangled them so they would not consume their bread. When Darius heard of this, he collected all his forces and led them against Babylon, and he marched up to the town and laid siege to it, but the Babylonians thought nothing of the siege. They came up onto the ramparts of the wall and taunted Darius and his army with gesture and word, and one of them uttered this mot: "Why loiter here, Persians, and not go away? You will take us when mules give birth." One of the Babylonians said this, by no means expecting that a mule would give birth. A year and 7 months passed, and Darius and his whole army were bitter because they could not take Babylon. Yet Darius had used every trick and every device against it. He tried the stratagem by which Cyrus took it, and every other stratagem and device, yet with no success, for the Babylonians kept a vigilant watch, and he could not take them. But in the 20th month of the siege a marvellous thing befell Zophorus, son of that Megabyzus who was one of the 7 destroyers of the Magus. One of his food-carrying mules gave birth. Zophorus would not believe the news, but when he saw the foal for himself, he told those who had seen it to tell no one. Then, reflecting, he recalled the Babylonians' word at the beginning of the siege, that the city would be taken when mules gave birth, and having this utterance in mind, he conceived that Babylon might be taken, for the hand of heaven, he supposed, was in the man's word, and the birth from his own mule. As soon as he thought that it was Babylon's fate to fall, he came and inquired of Darius if taking Babylon were very important to him, and when he was assured that it was, he then cast about for a plan by which the city's fall would be accomplished by him alone, for good service among the Persians is very much esteemed, and rewarded by high preferment. He could think of no other way to bring the city down than to mutilate himself, and then to desert to the Babylonians, so making light of it, he mutilated himself beyond repair, and after cutting off his nose and ears, and cropping his hair as a disfigurement and scourging himself, he came before Darius. The king reacted very violently to seeing a man so well respected mutilated, and springing from the throne he uttered a cry, and asked Zophorus who it was who had mutilated him, and why. "There is no man," he said, "except you, who has enough power to do this to me, and no one but I myself did this, O king, because I felt it terribly that Assyrians were laughing at Persians." Darius answered, "Unfeeling man, you give a pretty name to an ugly act if you say that it was on account of those besieged that you did for yourself past cure. Why, you poor fool, will the enemy surrender sooner because you mutilated yourself? How could you not have been out of your mind to disfigure yourself? Had I told you," said Zophorus, "what I intended to do, you would not have let me, but now I have done it on my own. Now then, if you do your part we shall take Babylon. I shall desert to the city as I am, and I shall say to them that I suffered this at your hands, and I think that I shall persuade them, and thus gain a command. Now on the 10th day after I enter the city, take 1,000 men from the part of your army about which you will care least if it is lost, and post them before the gate called the gate of Semiramis. On the 7th day after that, post 2,000 more before the gate called the gate of the Ninevites. And when 20 days are past after that 7th, lead out 4,000 more and post them before the Chaldean gate, as they call it. Allow neither these, nor the others that go before them, to carry any weapons except daggers. Leave them these. But immediately after the 20th day command the rest of your army to assault the whole circuit of the walls, and post the Persians before the gate of Belus and the gate called the Sicyon. For I think that once I have done conspicuous things, the Babylonians will give me, among other things, the keys of their gates. Then it will depend on me and the Persians to do what is necessary. Having given these instructions, he went to the gates, turning and looking back as though he were in fact a deserter. When the watch posted on the towers saw him, they ran down, and opening half the gate a little, asked him who he was and why he came. He told them that he was Zophirus, and was deserting to them. When they heard this, the gatekeepers brought him before the general assembly of the Babylonians, where he made a pitiful sight, saying that he had suffered at the hands of Darius what he had suffered at his own, because he had advised the king to lead his army away, since they could find no way to take the city. Now, he said in his speech to them, I come as a great boon to you, men of Babylon, and as a great bane to Darius and to his army and to the Persians, for he shall not get away with having mutilated me so, and I know all the issues of his plans. This was what he said. When the Babylonians saw the most well-respected man in Persia without his nose and ears, and all lurid with blood from the scourging, they were quite convinced that he was telling them the truth, and came as their ally, and were ready to give him all that he asked, and he asked for a command. When he got this from them, he did exactly as he had arranged with Darius. On the 10th day he led out the Babylonian army, surrounded and slaughtered the 1,000 whom he had instructed Darius to put on the field first. Seeing that he produced works equal to his words, the Babylonians were overjoyed and ready to serve him in every way. When the agreed number of days was past, he led out once more a chosen body of Babylonians, and slaughtered the 2,000 men of Darius's army. When the Babylonians saw this work too, the praise of Zophirus was on everyone's lips. The agreed number of days once again passing, he led out his men to the place he had named, where he surrounded the 4,000 and slaughtered them. And when he had done this, Zophirus was the one man for Babylon. He was made the commander of their armies and guard of the walls. So when Darius assaulted the whole circuit of the walls, according to the agreed plan, then Zophirus's treason was fully revealed. For while the townsmen were on the wall defending it against Darius's assault, he opened the gates called Sicyon and Belian, and let the Persians inside the walls. Those Babylonians who saw what he did fled to the temple of that Zeus whom they called Belus. Those who had not seen it remained in position until they too discovered how they had been betrayed. Thus Babylon was taken a second time, and when Darius was master of the Babylonians, he destroyed their walls and tore away all their gates, neither of which Cyrus had done at the first taking of Babylon. Moreover, he impaled about 3,000 men that were prominent among them. As for the rest, he gave them back their city to live in. Further, as the Babylonians, fearing for their food, had strangled their own women, as I described above, Darius provided wives to give them a posterity, by appointing that each of the neighboring nations should send a certain number of women to Babylon. The sum of the women thus collected was 50,000. These were the mothers of those who now inhabit the city. There never was, in Darius's judgment, any Persian before or after who did better service than Zophirus, except Cyrus, with whom no Persian could compare himself. Many times Darius is said to have declared that he would rather Zophirus were free of disfigurement than have 20 Babylons on top of the one he had. He honored him very much. Every year he sent him such gifts as the Persians hold most precious, and let him govern Babylon all his life with no tribute to pay, giving him many other things besides. This Zophirus was the father of Megabyzus, who was a general of an army in Egypt against the Athenians and their allies, and Megabyzus' son was that Zophirus who deserted from the Persians to Athens. End of Book 3. End of Histories, Volume 1, by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, Translated by E. D. Godley.